I would begin with the first element of the series of communication is authenticity. And this is something that's taught by many, many philosophers and speakers, trainers, coaches, that authenticity is very, very important. It's an element of communication that can only be done with an attitude, a certain attitude. It's not necessarily the words. Now, of course, the words reflect the attitude of authenticity. If you have an authentic sense about you, your words will reflect that. They just will. They'll reflect the authenticity that resides within you. Now, authenticity is sometimes you're authentic and real and people don't like you for that. And so you think you need to put on a facade to kind of cover that. But, I'm going to tell you, some people won't like the authentic you. They just won't, because the most effective speaking, the most effective communicating, let's not say speaking, but let's use the term communicating, that any of us will do is our life. That's the most effective communicating that any of us will do. Now, coming back and looking beyond our communicating in taking a look at the authenticity that is a element of communication, being authentic. Let's say you are authentic and some people don't like you for that. It's just okay. You get to be okay with that and move on with the ones that are. Let's say you're phony and you hide the real you. And I'm not talking about your name. I'm talking about your personality, who you are, the kindness that's within you and the desire to maybe serve and whatever it is that lies within your heart. You hide that because people don't really appreciate that about you, so you hide that real you. I get this many times. I get calls and tell me, you should tell such and such person to not be the way he is. And I listen to people and I hear them out and I thank them for their thoughts and their call, and I don't make that call, and I never tell somebody not to be who they are. Sometimes I'll ask them to improve some areas of their life, but this is the deal. If they're being authentic, even though they're rough and raw, I see them as a diamond in the rough. And so I give them time to grow through some of the rough areas of their life, because I realize that them being authentically themselves will get them to where they want to be much quicker than if they try to put on a facade before they have developed themselves into the authentic person that they want to be at the next level. So let's come back to the illustration. Let's say you put on this facade and you're kind of phony and people like you. That's pretty cool. They like that phony guy. Only to discover that's not really who you are. They discovered, no, that guy is uniquely different than the facade that I had seen. And when they discover that, they don't like that either. They sure don't like that. So let me conclude with this. Bear with me. Authenticity does not guarantee success. And let me repeat that. Authenticity does not guarantee success. But inauthenticity does guarantee failure. Being inauthentic does guarantee failure. There's no way around it. It will. The failure has to be a part of that journey. And then when I'm talking failure, I'm not talking about making a mistake and goofing a little bit and then putting yourself back on the wagon. I'm talking about really taking you out of the game. So being authentic may seem raw and uncut at times. And it is. That's what authenticity is raw and uncut version of you. Now, later, as you develop yourself and personal growth begins to take its effect on your life, then you become the raw, cut version of you. Not the uncut, but the cut version of you. And your authentic self then becomes way more attractive than the authentic, raw, uncut version of you was earlier. Authenticity is very attractive. People can connect, relate. They understand that this person is just like them. I had some individual once from in front of the room talk about how much money they had made and, all this goofy stuff. And if people could just see right through that, the guy had not done millions of dollars a year in business, just didn't. And so that wasn't authentic. That was a facade. It was phony. And it was very easy to see through that. And so it wasn't attractive. But as we grow ourselves and we allow our truth to be there, suddenly that becomes very attractive, and you can serve and support people by your authentic self. That's the rule number one in the elements of communication. And of course, I'm not putting them in any sequence. This is the first one that I'm talking about in communication. I want to thank Craig again for the request. But the first rule in communication is authenticity, and recognizing when you're putting on a facade and being able to release that as soon as possible. Come back to the real you and understand that your authentic life brings you more business, more clients, better relationships than the phony side of you. And this is something that we get to all have awareness of, because all of us are tempted to put on a facade. Let's say Jesus spoke on, let's just go back to him for a second. He spoke on the Sermon on the Mount, which was a very, very, very powerful sermon that he preached. Let's take a look and say, what if somebody else had preached that sermon? Let's say it had been Judas Iscariot or Peter or any of the others. Would it have carried the same weight as it did with Jesus? No, of course not, because that was authentically him. The message that he preached on the Sermon on the Mount, that was him. That was who he was. You see, he was displaying the authentic, true image and persona of Christ when he was on the Mount doing this, preaching this sermon. Let's say the Gettysburg Address was done by the Confederate president. Would that have carried the same value? Of course not. It would have been a whole different ballgame. The Gettysburg Address would not have really meant anything. It was a very simple address, 260-some words, and over 200 of them were single-syllable words, but yet one of the most powerful speeches ever spoken. Had it have been the same had the president of the Confederate preached it? No, because that would not have been consistent with who he is. That would not have been authentically him. That would have been a persona that he was putting on, and it would have carried very little value. It would have just been another speech that nobody would have believed and or desired to try to even understand what this guy's saying. Let's continue moving forward. There's so many other scenarios that we can look at and examples and say, what if such and such would have happened? And then we're all aware that, like Martin Luther King, I have a dream, that speech that was spoken. Let's say that the President of the United States would have spoken that. It would have carried much less value. Why is that? Because it was authentically Dr. Martin Luther King that had this, he was expressing his inner self in this speech. The speech is amazing what he did. It was incredible. But what was more incredible is we seen Martin Luther King in his speech. That was authentically him. That was the real Dr. Martin Luther King. That was him. We seen a person in that speech, and it was amazing. It stirred the world. It changed it forever. And what happened because of that speech? You see, guys, being authentic is an absolute must to be an effective communicator, because who you are will speak out. Even though you try to put on this persona, who you are will show up. But if you are intentional about being who you are and authentic and real, and care less about what people think, it's just none of your business. You will find yourself being more relaxed, less stress, and you allow yourself to be that beautiful person that God created. You don't have to put on this persona, and you become way more attractive to the people you're communicating with. And that goes for all of us. The first law or the first rule in communication is authenticity. Thank you, guys. Make it a great day, and as always, remember, don't settle for less than who you are. May God bless you.